without further ado, Mark Bedell.
All right, thank you. Let me start off by number one just saying hello and good evening to all of you. All right, and I know it's you've been in here now for probably about an hour, and as I'm kind of perusing and looking through the audience, I see some familiar faces, so that's already helping to kind of ease a little bit of anxiety. Anytime you're having to come up to the podium and you have to speak with a large group of people in a city where you've only had an opportunity to visit for a couple of times, it can be intimidating. And but you know, I'm not the type that intimidates easily. My name is Dr. Mark Bedell. Right now I work in Baltimore County Public Schools as an assistant superintendent. I'm from Rochester, New York, and I know we have to give a little bit of our leadership story to you, so I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible because I know there are probably pretty much a bunch of questions that need to be fielded. So I'm from Rochester, New York. I am the oldest out of 8. I am the only one out of 8 to graduate from high school. All of my siblings dropped out prior to making it past the 9th grade. My mom had me when she was 16. My mother was a drug addict. My mother was an alcoholic. We grew up in a very abusive environment. My father is still alive and I don't know him. Just like many of the kids that, you know, we serve here in Kansas City, where they are going home to some pretty tough scenarios, some broken, you know, unstable situations, and but I was able to make it through. You know, in the 2nd grade, I dropped out of school. I dropped out of school because a teacher told me I was dumb, ugly, and would never amount to anything. And there wasn't anyone who was going to advocate for me. And so it was easy for a kid like me who was already being told outside of the schoolhouse that I wasn't worth much and that there was not much that I could potentially do, that I was not a smart kid. So eventually that prompted CPS to come in. They split up all of us. There were 6 of us at the time, and 2 of us lived with an aunt, 2 of us lived with another aunt, and then 2 of us lived with another set of aunts and uncles. And from the age of about 7 until about 14, going on 15, we lived with different relatives. And we ended up moving back in with my mother. By the time I was in the 9th grade, it didn't work. I got a job as a custodian. I brought home my first check. It was about $63, some change. My mom said, "You have to pay rent." And I said, "I'm not going to pay rent because you're going to use the money to purchase drugs." I said, "What I will do is go to the corner store and I will purchase some bologna, some cheese, and some bread so we can eat." I go to do that. I come back. My clothes are being thrown out. As a 9th grader, I was homeless. We have a homeless population. It is growing in this country every day and it's becoming an epidemic. And so I was homeless for several nights, slept in an abandoned car, a couple of nights, still got up and went to school. I ended up going and staying with some friends. I stayed with a relative. It didn't work. I went back with my mom. It didn't work. By mid-9th grade year, I'm living with my grandmother. Guess what? We have a lot of kids right now who are being raised by grandma. And grandma is tired because grandma already raised her kids and she's being forced to assume an additional responsibility. So guess what happens? Grandma can't keep up. So now there's not necessarily that accountability in place. And so our kids are falling into some of the other things that often happens with poverty, which is skipping, which is engaging in drugs and alcohol, which is engaging in having sex and doing things that adults do that you're not ready for. So this cycle continues. You have kids, you drop out, and we don't ever improve the community as a result. I was fortunate because I had good people who came into my life. The whites, those are my guardians, my best friend parents, they came into my life. I had people I worked with, even if it was just for 2 weeks, they made a difference in my life. Eventually, I got out of high school. Now, let me share this with you before we move into the component where you guys begin to ask me questions. But I told you about the bad teachers, but there were good teachers. My homeroom teacher, Mr. Barrett, he made me believe that I could do more than I ever thought I could do. And Mr. Barrett allowed for me to let my guards down. He said, you have to talk to somebody, you have some academic potential that you don't even know, it's untapped. You have to talk to somebody and you have to let them know what you're going through. 2 weeks later, I went back to Mr. Barrett. I told him everything that I was going through. He connected me with Miss Blaylock, 2 social study teachers, 2 white teachers. They just had a heart. They didn't live through what I lived through, but they had a heart. And they made me believe that I could do more than I ever thought I could do. That's the power of a great teacher who cares and they want to make a difference in the lives of children. And so I made the honor roll, and for the first time I'm getting called into an assembly, and it felt good to get called down for an assembly because of doing something successful. And it gave me a taste of success, and I was able to make my way and get into college, had a great basketball career in college. My wife, I would love for you to stand. This is my wife, Robin Bedell. She's here with us today. I met her at Fisk University and was very, very fortunate to have had that opportunity. We've been together now pretty much since almost 20 years or so now. I mean, we dated for a while, but but we have 3 kids, right? And our 3 kids, the goal for it is if we're given this opportunity to come here and engage in this journey of taking this school system to it becoming a fully accredited school system and beyond, and a thriving school system, our kids will be a part of that journey. We're going to bring our 3 kids, and they will be a part of this school system. You know, so when we talk about, and I know the question will come up later about commitment, we're committed. My wife is not interested, and I know we have some individuals in here from the military, ROTC. You know, in the military, every 3 years or so, you're moving from one place to another. We're not interested in becoming that family. We're interested in finding somewhere where we can be stable, where we can bring some consistency and some familiarity in terms of the things that we want to do with this school system, because we owe it to our kids. Because remember, a lot of them are going to stuff where it is completely no balance, no consistency, and the only consistency that they're looking for is oftentimes what we have to offer in this school system. So if we're constantly changing the head, which is the superintendent, every 3 years, how do we truly make progress? How do we allow for people to say that we're on board with a strategic plan that is designed to have this school system to begin to thrive again? And that's by us having to be here working together. So I have K through 12 experience, and if you go and you look at my body of work, no, I have not been a superintendent yet, but I've worked in the 7th largest school system. I work in the 25th largest school system. The schools that I'm responsible for, in some cases, I'm responsible for 31,000 students right now. When I worked in Houston, I was responsible for 20,000 students when I supervised schools. And so I've done this work, and I've done it well. I've turned low-performing schools around. The schools that I supervise now, they're thriving, enrollment is up, and the data speaks for itself. So that's what I will be able to bring to this school system if I'm selected as the next superintendent.
Okay, Mark, I appreciate those opening remarks, and the questions I'll be asking you are the questions are written down in the audience that the other candidate will have a chance. Probably the toughest question you're going to get tonight is when you leave here and you talk to your wife about how many years you've been married. So that might be the toughest one.
I don't think I made that mistake. Did I make that mistake? I said we've been together for 20 years.
You don't have to explain it to me.
15, almost 16. Yeah, she's looking at it.
You don't have to explain it to me.
15 years, everybody, almost 16.
Okay, well, I'm going to start firing away and then get out of the way here. But okay, how do you intend to engage local business?
All right, so I've had an opportunity during my work in Houston ISD. We did this initiative called the Apollo 20, and it was an initiative where we took the 5 research-based tenets of successful charter schools. We implemented that in some of our most struggling schools. In order for us to get the money that we needed, we had to engage the business communities in a way where we showed them, here's our plan in terms of what we want to add to these schools. When we know that if we can get these schools to perform and we can get our students to be successful, that begins to add more value in terms of what happens with the housing market. It adds more value in terms of the product that we can produce that will be able to feed into your businesses and into your company. So we went to them and we showed them this plan. We raised probably somewhere in the range of $14.5 million through philanthropy, through the Houston Foundation, through some of the other business entities, which allowed for us to get out, and we were able to hire a tremendous amount of tutors that were able to work with our kids in small ratios of 2 to 1. And what we saw with the data was phenomenal. The study is actually out. You could probably Google the study, find it. It was conducted by Roland Fryer, who is an economist at Harvard University. And that particular program right now is being replicated across the country, most notably Denver ISD, where they're doing it pretty much system-wide, K through 12, offering this particular model. Some of the other tenets included us really having a strong focus on data, and not to use data in a punitive manner. Now, I think when you start talking about the use of data, data should be used to help inform your practice as a teacher. It should help you to, from a pedagogical standpoint, go back, read to, and do some of the different things that you need to do in terms of scaffolding. But in particular, giving our students immediate feedback on the gaps that they have so that we can give them interventions real time, and if our schedules permit that, during the school day. Because in many cases, our kids aren't coming before, and a lot of them aren't coming after school. So we got to figure out, how do we build this during the school day to give them the support that they need in response to the data. But I've done this work in terms of really securing strong business partnerships. I did it as a principal. We had a $300,000 deficit. We were able to get a couple of 21st century grants. I hired a grant writer because my school, after that first year, we took it out of being academically unacceptable, so we weren't receiving Title I money. And so we had to supplement that somehow, so it was going through the business entities, writing grants, and then being able to secure money to help supplement your budget so that you can do some of those things above and beyond that you want to do in your school system.
Mark, I think you have answered this a little bit, but I'm going to still ask you, in order to be fair. You touched upon it in your opening remarks, but why Kansas City Public Schools? And if you are selected, what would be your immediate focus with students, parents, employees, and community?
Well, as I've stated to several groups that I've spoken to throughout the day, my wife and I were sitting at the table probably about 2 months ago, and I was telling her, hey, there's some opportunities to apply for some superintendent jobs, and there's some school systems that we were even looking at possibly applying for in Texas. And my wife said to me, she said, look, Mark, you've gone through a lot in your life, right? She said that you need to make sure that you keep a perspective in terms of what you want to do on being able to have an impact on kids just like you, right? And so when Kansas City opportunity came across the table, kind of went in and I looked at the data, I looked at some of the strides that have been made. I mean, you guys are now provisionally accredited, but I looked at the student demographic. You have a growing ELL population. You have, a 90+% free and reduced lunch. I am a KCPS student, but I'm one that succeeded, right? And so ultimately, what I want to be able to bring to the table here is to say to these students, I've been through what you're living through, right? If you read the article yesterday, one of the things the union president said was, our teachers are really sad and I'm crying, and if I was younger, I'd want to come and work with you. Not because I just side with the teacher unions. I'm fair. I'm completely objective. But you know what the teachers like the most about me? When I come to a school, I go in their room with the approach of, how can I support you? Not going into their classrooms to look at what they're not doing and how bad these kids are. I come into classrooms and I say, how can I support you, right? And ultimately, teachers will say, I have this one young male student. I have this one female student. Can you come and just talk to this kid? Or can you come and speak to my class? And I do those things. And it makes a difference because it lets the teachers know that, Bedell, Dr. Bedell is here to support you. I do that. And so that's what I'll bring to the table. I'm going to bring authenticity. I'm genuine. I'm passionate. I'm going to be relentless in the pursuit of excellence for this school system. And if I'm telling you, I'm putting 3 of my kids in this school system, I don't know when's the last time you had a superintendent who put kids in the school system. But if that's not commitment, I don't know what else is.
Okay, well, thank you. You know, that when the Kansas City came open, you didn't get a call from any consultant, did you, for a plan? So anyway, how important is parent engagement?
So I honestly, it's tremendous. It is tremendous. And I can tell you personally, working at the high school ranks, parent involvement significantly drops. And I used to worry about it a lot because I felt like, you know, that's the time when our kids really need parents, especially when they're getting through high school and they're trying to navigate into the real world. And so for me, I'm real big on, you know, attending PTSA meetings, PTO meetings. I'm real big on the advisory committees that we have. If you go online, you'll see that I presented at several of them where they've asked me to come in and present on grit, resiliency, perseverance, and those types of things, and lessons learned from failure. So I've done a lot of that to really encourage our parents that, you know, we're here to support you. We want you to be partners in this journey. And I think that if you look at a lot of research out there, and I've included some of it in my dissertation, you find that because of some terrible experiences that some of our young adults have had with school systems, with not having trust, not believing in what the schools could offer them, and they've dropped out, well, that cycle has continued. They're not coming into the schools to advocate because they've had bad experiences. So how do we get into the community, get them reinvigorated, allow for them to become a part of really helping their children, because in many cases, they simply don't know how to help their kids. Nobody's taught them. And so how do we get in here and we put a plan in place? I mean, we have community liaisons, we have people who work directly with the community. That would be something that I would be interested in trying to figure out. How do we engage the community better? And how do we make sure that the communication is open, is timely, is relevant? Because the one thing that I hear, and we talked about it in the office a few minutes ago, is that, you know, a lot of parents say, well, we don't hear anything, we don't know anything. But if we're going to communicate with you, we know that if we send things home, and we have kids right now, we don't get one of our kids, we don't get stuff. And I'm an assistant superintendent. I'm like, man, I'm like, young man, you embarrassing me, man. This is a bad look. So in any event, we don't even get that stuff, but we have to make sure that not only are we sending items home, but that we're posting it on the website. We know we're a one-to-one device school system, making sure that we have hot spots around the community so that our kids have access so that they're able to you know, engage with the technology in a way that's going to help them to you know, to open up the world to them and for them to be stronger with their learning outcomes. So I just think that it's extremely critical, but I believe you have to have a system in place for that. It's not something that you can just do. It has to be a system, and it has to be customer service oriented.
Thank you. Next question would be, how do you plan to recruit, develop, and retain highly effective teachers?
All right, so you know, I've had some issues with that as a high school principal. I was at Booker T. Washington in Houston ISD. It was, when I took over the school, it was low performing, it was academically unacceptable, and it was a dropout factory. And we did not have people wanting to apply to that school. And what we did was we came in and, first of all, we had to stabilize some things. You know, we had to put some systems in place around how we handle discipline management. We had to put some systems in place from an instructional standpoint so that we have a strong instructional focus, that anybody who came on our campus would see that our kids were getting a highly engaged curriculum being taught to them. Then what we had to do then was to say to our people in the community, you know, we're looking for some strong teachers. We'd love to be able to figure out how we could partner with some of the local universities, working with our HR department. We did that. We were able to start bringing people onto our campus. You know, letting people, telling our story. Oftentimes, we let everybody else tell our story, and we don't ever provide a counter narrative. So then we're constantly getting destroyed when you don't allow, you have to tell your own story. And that needs to happen through our communication department. once people hear that there are some good things happening, my wife and I we were just talking about all the things that we've heard that was negative, and then to come here today and to engage with so many of you, we've heard nothing but positive things about what's happening in this school system, the compassion and the care that many of you all have in here. That's why you're here tonight, about what's happening in this school system. And so you want to be able to give that message out to the universities. And if you really want to develop and have good human talent, part of it is the partnership that you have with these teacher preparation programs. We know right now that we have a Montessori program that we can't really recruit teachers for because there's not necessarily a preparation program in place that's preparing teachers to really have a feeder into the school system. So we talked about that today during my visit. We also know that we have this ELL population that is growing, and we don't have multilingual teachers. We don't have enough teachers in the school system that are trained, with SIOP, which is the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, which is a widely known program that works extremely well. So how do we make sure that we have a partnership with our local universities to have those components in there, and to say that we want to have a partnership with you where you're creating and you're providing a feeder pattern, a feeder of teachers that will want to come into this school. I've never had a problem staffing my schools because a lot of what I did was I was out there at those job fairs. Think about having a superintendent who can go out there and give a message and convey to you, this is the reason why you want to work for this gentleman. That's what my superintendent is doing right now in Baltimore County. And he has people coming from all around the country wanting to work in that school system just because of his passion and what he's able to do to attract some strong people that want to work and they want to do hard work. This is not a place where it's easy work. So I can't deal with people who want to come here and just collect a paycheck. You won't survive under me.
Hey, Mark. I have a number of questions here, but let's start with this one. How do you plan to balance the budget?
So one, we have, Mr. Toon is, my understanding is he's extremely proficient with the budget. So, and that's, at least, that's from, I know a couple of years ago, there was some deficits. There was some major deficits, and, I guess from the reports that I've looked at, the audits are revealing that, the school system is doing right by with the taxpayers' money. And so, making sure that as we look at developing our strategic plan, that we want to make sure that from a fiscal standpoint, that it's going to be realistic, that we'll be able to do the things that we need to do. We know that the majority of your budget goes to human capital. In most school systems, that can range anywhere from 83 to 85%. And then you generally have about 15% left that you're able to use in your operating budget. So we want to make sure that, number one, we don't want to be too heavy that we're taking away from instruction, right? And so even if it's administrative or even if it's just program rich, we want to make sure that what we're doing makes sense. We want to make sure that the strategic plan is one that is designed to give schools a little bit more autonomy to customize what they need to do for their particular communities. Because you can't take this cookie cutter approach, and I shared this with everybody earlier. One method doesn't work for everybody. So you want to give some customization. And in doing that, you have to make sure that as you're meeting with the various departments, curriculum, the resources and the things that you're purchasing, you want to make sure that you're within the boundaries of what that budget will allow for you to do. And then you have to stay true to that.
Okay, what are the two books you've read that influenced your career? Your career? Thank you.
So one I would say would be Savage Inequalities. I don't know how many people read that book. I want to say by Jonathan Kozol. I read that a long time ago. In my cell phone, and you try not to pull out a cell phone, but I told you I'm extremely authentic, right? And I want to speak my truth to you. I took pictures of students today too on this, so I might tweet some stuff out later. But in here, this was an article that was done in 1997, February 20th, 1997. I was getting ready to graduate from college. I was leading the nation in scoring. I had opportunities. I got invited to several NBA pro camps, and I was pretty much thinking I was on my way to play in the league. And that's exactly what I told my teacher. They said, one day you're going to become a teacher. I said, no, I'm going to the NBA. I don't know what you're talking about. But I got out there in that pro camp, and my wife was there with me. And it was a different world. I mean, you know, I could tell kids how hard it is to make the pro. You know, coming from Division III, you can average 28 points a game, but it's a whole different world. And at that point, when I didn't get the phone call, I was thinking, I may be on the verge of losing my woman. I don't know if she was with me just for basketball. But she wasn't. She was really here for me, so I was thankful about that. But in this article, I said, it says, Bedell's career comes to a close. He will graduate with a degree in history and education. There may be some pro basketball in his future, but probably not. He definitely, I know that was cold-blooded. He definitely plans to attend graduate school and get his teaching credentials. I want to teach, Bedell said. If I was to somehow get rich, I would probably go to the poorest school in the country and teach. Maybe East St. Louis or back in New York. And I said, in my 12 years of school, I only had one black male teacher, and I think kids today need to see that. I think I can relate to them because I've been through some tough times. But that East St. Louis piece came from that book. That story really moved me. And then I would say more so, one of the books that I read while I was working on my doctoral program was Leadership on the Line. And you know, it's a really good book because it teaches you how to come into a situation, you know, how to take a balcony approach. It teaches you about adaptive leadership. It teaches you about, you know, how to get in here and how to really lead and how to be supportive and not to just come into a place and just tear up and destroy things. I'm not interested in coming in here and saying we're going to destroy what's already been put in place. And I know that seems to be one of the major concerns with everybody. Like, we have a pretty good plan. We went into Baltimore County and the plan there was blueprint. Our superintendent engaged the community for the first 100 days. We came back and we said, you know what? There's a lot of good things happening here already. We're just going to call it Blueprint 2.0. And after engaging the community, there's a few things that we're going to put in this plan that will continue to do the work that we've been doing, but we'll add in a few things that we now have gotten from the community over that first 100 days to really make this a robust plan. And so those books are books that really have helped to influence me, and it's a part of the reason why I love doing what I do.
Thank you. Kansas City Public Schools has made investments in early childhood. Would you be willing to continue or increase those investments?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the longer we wait for our kids to get in school, the further behind they are. Every bit of research shows that if you're not in an environment where somebody is reading to you, somebody is, you know, working with you on your letter recognition, you know, helping you to really just learn how to read at an early age. By the time you get into kindergarten, you're already behind. My wife and I, we've had our 3-year-old, all of our kids, actually, we had them in school by 3. Our daughter, you know, and then our 2 youngest kids, because of the way the school system was set up, we had to put them in private school early because we really didn't have an opportunity to get them to take advantage of the pre-K programs. But I'll tell you this, and this is kind of crazy, it may be bold, but if it was up to me, I'd love to be able to have kids start school at the age of 2. And listen to me when I say this, you know, because I know at that point we're talking about, you know, a lot of concrete learning opportunities for our kids. They're in that early phase of you know, the different levels of Piaget, pre-operational stage in many cases. But think about the fact that if you can get kids in at a lot earlier, and let's say we even have our kids coming in maybe 3 days a week, right? And this is crazy, but sometimes you have to think outside the box in order to be great, right? And you have these 2-year-olds coming into school, maybe on a Tuesday, maybe on a Thursday, and then we come with some type of commitment where we can have a 4-hour session on Saturday. And we say to our parents, part of the expectation for you to be able to be a part of this program is you have to, one of those 3 days, you have to come in and we have to allow for us to work with you and teach you on how to be an advocate for your child, right? So think about what this system would look like if those 2-year-olds matriculate and 14 years down the line, think about how far ahead they will be. Think about the rigorous opportunities and learning opportunities that they will have the minute they step into kindergarten. And so, you know, those are the kind of things that I really want to think outside the box. I was the first school improvement officer in Houston ISD, in the history of Houston ISD, to work with one of my schools, and we had school on Saturday and Sunday. We had school from 8 to 4 on Saturday and Sunday. And what we did was we asked teachers, we sent the mass email out to the thousands of teachers in Houston ISD. And we said to them, we'll pay you $25 an hour plus a half hour of planning if you're willing to come in and work with our kids on Saturday and Sunday. And we had a long list of teachers who were good teachers that were interested in doing that. It allowed for us to allow for our kids to recover some credits. We had some kids who were able to do some acceleration. This is arguably one of the worst high schools in Houston ISD, Cashmere High School. That school made the newspaper the following year for the growth that occurred in that school, the graduation rates. But you have to think outside the box, and you have to be willing to do some things that other people simply aren't willing to do.
What are your plans to improve student achievement and college attendance and competition for Kansas City Public Schools?
All right, so student achievement, we just have to be intentional on our plan, right? I mean, it's just that simple. We have to put a plan out that everybody can say, I agree with this plan. This is the strategic direction we're going in, and these are the non-negotiables in terms of what we expect to see happen in our classrooms, right? We have to make sure that we have everybody on board with that. What we've done, and I can tell you just from my experience of closing gaps, you know, as a principal, we were able to do that. We were able to, I did something unique. I told the group earlier today, I was one of the first high schools where we were in a decentralized school system in Houston ISD. So decentralized means that you're given a budget that you're allowed to do whatever you want to do with it based on student enrollment. So the more students you get in the school, per pupil expenditure is probably somewhere around $3,500. If you can get 70 additional kids to come to your school, you now have the ability to hire some unique positions for teachers. You have the ability to create some unique opportunities for students in terms of giving them choice. One of the things I did was I created it was called a Dean of Discipline position. And what I did was I hired a Dean of Discipline, I gave this person training, and I hired a secretary to work with him. Their sole responsibility, in addition to some other things, was to handle discipline for the whole school. And then what I did was then I had all of my administrators, I said, you guys, I'm taking discipline off your plate. My 3 assistant principals, your job is to be in the classrooms. I want you in classrooms supporting teachers. I want you in classrooms, you know, evaluating what's happening in terms of teaching and learning. And let me tell you what happened. What ended up happening was at the end of that school year, we had the highest scores that we ever had. Discipline went down because there was a presence with administrators in the classroom. We were able to hone in on who were the high flyer people that were kicking all the kids out because one person had it. So then we were able to customize professional development to help support that teacher in the management skills. And so we put some of these things in place, and it absolutely worked. It helped student achievement because we were able to reduce suspension rates. We were able to reduce the number of kids who were missing classes, and it just makes sense. It just makes sense. So we were able to do that. That allowed for us to then increase our graduation rates. And many of you may know, in terms of kids matriculating into college, I'm actually over the whole dropout initiative in my school system right now. Right? I took the same dropout method that I had when I was a high school principal. I utilized it in Houston ISD. I brought it to Baltimore County, and we have formalized it in a way that every single school in my system, there's an accountability. And the only thing, because we're at an 87.6% graduation rate. When I started in Baltimore County in 2012, we were at an 83% graduation rate. We actually now have the second highest graduation rate in the country for African American males. We basically eradicated the achievement gap, but it's because of accountability, it's because of being intentional, And as a result, we have more kids now that are able to matriculate into college. So we talked about giving our kids more opportunity for college. We're doing early college work right now. I brought a team into Houston with our community college and some people that I work with to look at some of the early college models in Houston. And we're looking at having more of our kids to leave out with an associate's degree, as a result of this work. So a lot of it, once again, is just about systems and making sure that you don't have any holes in your system. And if you do those things, you can get the same type of results that I've gotten everywhere that I've gone. It's just about being consistent, and there's an accountability. And let me say this, the one thing that I would do differently if I was to get this job that I didn't do in Baltimore County or even in Houston is that when we have our dropout prevention meetings, oftentimes the focus is generally from a reactive standpoint, right? It's always what's not happening at the high school level. But if I become superintendent, our focus is going to be that there's going to be a requirement that a representative from elementary, a representative from middle school is a part of these monthly dropout prevention meetings, because the attendance rate issue is a problem, and it starts at elementary school and then they matriculate through, but we don't often include them in a discussion around how can we provide support for you at the elementary level. We worry so much about getting the kids across the stage as far as being reactive from a graduation rate standpoint, but if we get it earlier, we won't have these massive issues by the time they get to high school.
You just answered my question on dropouts.
Good, we speeding this up because I'm
now I'm following the script.
I'm going to tell some of the board members I was shaking at 2 o'clock today. I hadn't had a chance to eat. Okay.
Now that's part of the process, see how strong you are. Anyway, how open are you to working with community organizations and even the faith community?
Yeah, I'm very open. That was one of my strengths. Actually, it's one of my strengths now. I can tell you right now, the NAACP in Baltimore County told me that she called me the other day and said, if you need to give anybody my number, you can give them my number, and you can tell them to give me a call, and I will tell them about you. Real feisty lady too. She's really feisty, but she knows that. I truly believe in being transparent. I want to make sure that they're at the table, that they have an idea of what's going on. In particular, with faith-based, I'm not afraid to sit here and tell everybody that my family, we're Christians. We go to church. I actually serve on the security team in my church. So I know that, yes, I do. I do push-ups. So, but I actually, I serve in my church, and we're really involved in that piece, because I can tell people that, if it's not for the Lord, I'm not here. There's no way on earth I would have made it through what I've made it through that journey without, the right people being put in my life. So as far as faith-based, yeah, we absolutely want them to be a partner. And the nomination does not matter to me. What matters to me is, are you truly interested in helping us to take this school system to the next level? And are your motives designed to make the Kansas City Public School a better school system, and that they're not personal motives? Because that is always a concern when you're dealing with specific institutions, specific groups. Everybody, they have their own, agenda. We got to figure out how we get everybody on the same agenda in the interest of our kids in this city.
How do you feel about closing? Like I told the other candidate, this is one that all superintendents like to, answer here. How do you feel about closing buildings?
It's tough. I've done it. I've had to stand in front of people, and I've had to tell people that, the proposal at this point is that we're going to have to close this school. The utilization of the building right now is just, we have a building that can seat 2,000 students, and this was in one of the schools in Houston, and we only have about 400 kids in the building. It's just not cost effective. When I think about the fact that, 73% of your budget is on the back of taxpayers here, but then when I go and I look at the median incomes of a lot of these people who are paying taxes, their ends don't meet. So if they're struggling to make ends meet, and then we're not being responsible as adults with taxpayers' money, I mean, what sense does that make, right? So at the end of the day, the question is, yeah, we have to close, we have to look at doing that. Now, I've read this master plan, and, if I'm selected, there's going to be some things that I have to really become deeper and more familiar with. I don't think that I'm in a position right now to say, oh, we're going to close this school or that school, but I can tell you that we can't continue to run this school system as the way that we're running it. When that money, when I look at your MAP scores, and I look at, and we have, in some cases, in some schools, well over 80% of our kids can't even meet with proficiency, and we don't have any money to provide the interventions to help close the gaps, that's an epidemic. And so if we can, we have to look at that, and we have to be realistic about, if we're closing and we're having to do boundary changes, what kind of academic return are we going to get on making those decisions and the investments that we're having to put into student, ultimately for student achievement. So, yeah, it's definitely not a comfortable conversation. I can tell you, and he told me to use a little bit of humor, which I'm good at doing. I was called, one time, you supporting the white devil. You ain't nothing but a supporter of the white devil. I was told that because we had to close down the school in the black community, and that hurt. But, people are adamant about their schools, and especially when you're thinking about a high school where you are an alumni of that school, and now that school no longer exists, that's personal. But it's a reality. We have to do it across the country in many of our school systems, and it's something that we're going to have to face together as a community.
Since you brought up the topic, what do you think of our the new Kansas City Public School Master Plan?
I honestly, that's a hard question to answer because I've kind of just perused through it. I mean, I read it, but I haven't really personalized with it. But what I can tell you is, when I look at some of what's been provided in terms of, the stability of some of our buildings, the facilities, it raises a lot of concern, right? If our kids are going into schools and, they're having a rating that's, 50% or lower in some cases in terms of just the stability of the building. Some of these environments are not safe. We don't necessarily have the infrastructure that we need. We have one-to-one, but do we truly have the infrastructure to be able to maintain and hold all of that in some of these buildings that are just outdated? There's a lot of renovations that need to take place. And then even with the utilization of the buildings, there's quite a few buildings where we have a handful of students in these buildings, but it's fully staffed. We're running gas and electric and water, and all of that costs a lot of money. And so I think there are some valid components in that plan that I do believe there's some valid components in there. But I can't really speak to boundary changes and zoning and all of those good things because I really don't know the area that well to say what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. But from reading that, I know that the report is telling us that there's some things that we're going to have to do, that we're going to have to change as far as the school system is concerned.
What is your approach to district charter relationships and cooperations, and how do you intend to work with the charter community?
All right, so I'll sit here and tell everybody I believe in school choice. I do, but I don't believe in school choice to the point where it becomes detrimental for the school that I work in, period. I worked, like I said, in Houston ISD since 1997. We kind of consider charter schools friends. We had 36 charter schools that were open in Houston. About 18 of them have closed. Some of them are standalone charters. Some of the charter schools are a part of their state charter schools, and then some are charter schools that are connected directly with Houston ISD, where we still hold the accountability in terms of student achievement and all of those different variables that schools are held accountable for. But I truly believe that what we have to do, and I shared this with the board during the first interview, is we have to make sure that we're customizing and we're offering programs in our school system that will make this school system become the school system of choice, right? And a lot of it is just based on perception. A lot of people have this negative perception, and at the end of the day, I went to some schools today. I saw some phenomenal things today. I saw some outstanding teaching taking place. I saw some motivated staff members. The principals that I spoke to, they were passionate. They said to me, I said, tell me what's one thing that you really love about your job, and what's one thing that you would need that would really allow for you to take this school to the next level. And, you know, of course, they told me their passion in terms of why they want this job, but the common answer that came out was, we'd like to have more resources so we can do some unique things with our kids. So we can give our kids some of those practical experiences that they don't ever get to get. We don't have money, and we're constantly having to seek money from different people, and sometimes it's just really hard. But with the charter schools, they have a lot of that support. They have the funds to do some of those unique things, and it's up to us to make sure that we're putting some of those particular programs in place in our schools so that we're more competitive with the charter schools. And I think that we can do that. I think that a lot of it is what we can put in our plan as we engage the community. And one of the things I said to people today is, we oftentimes, we come up with these plans, and we put these plans in place. But how many of us have taken the time to engage students, to ask students, what is it that they want? To survey students to say, what is it that you want that will allow for you to really have a rich learning experience? And we have to make sure that we're getting the voice of students. And as we're getting ready to put these programs in place, if it's based on what our students want, they're going to go out and talk to their friends. They're going to go out and tell people, you know, this school system is offering these things. You don't need to go to that charter school. Come back home. And we have to be able to engage our students and allow for them to kind of help us with this movement around what it is that we need to be able to provide to make us more competitive with some of our charters.
Are you an advocate for community or neighborhood schools?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a neighborhood school guy. I mean, I graduated from the public school system. I've worked, you know, in pure feeder patterns. All my work has been in public school. So yeah, of course, I am a huge advocate. I believe in the public school system. We had our kids in private school only because we couldn't get them in public school at the age that we wanted to get them in. But by the time they were eligible to go to public school, we moved our kids into public school. And our kids are doing extremely well. So I'm a huge advocate of neighborhood schools and, you know, making sure that we have, and that's something we have to look at. That's something the master plan calls for, is to look at, you know, do we have pure feeders in place? You know, because one of the things that I found in Baltimore County is that in some of our schools, we don't have pure feeders. And it's an absolute nightmare when kids don't get to go to school with some of their friends because the feeder patterns are not pure, and then we're having war battles between principals taking kids from other schools that should be going to this school, and a lot of it is not based on the performance of the school, but on the fact that I don't get to go to school with my friends that I've been in school with, you know, from kindergarten through 8th grade.
What will you do to better involve parents in the education process?
Okay. All right, so I guess what I said earlier is, you know, to make sure that when we do the 100 days, that we're engaging the community in a way where they do feel like their voices are being heard. When we're doing our town hall meetings, when we're doing our community forums, you know, we want to go and we want to do a listening and learning tour. And then we want to make sure that we have departments in this school system with personnel. That's their responsibility, is to get out and to make sure that the community is being involved, that our parents are becoming advocates and they're becoming a part of what's happening every day in the lives of their children. So that will be one of my charges, and, you know, and I want to plan. I want to know exactly how are we going to accomplish this. And let's say that we go to, let's say we try to execute this. And, you know, so we can't just have one way that we're saying we're executing this. We got to have several different options, because sometimes one way just don't work for certain communities. You got to have options. And so that's, you know, some of the things that I would definitely charge staff with if I'm selected.
Okay. What is your track record for closing the black-white achievement gap?
Okay, so I answered that one too. So earlier, what I've said is, you know, as a high school principal, we ended up having record high scores by the end of my 3rd year. And I'm not sitting here saying to you all that the school was exemplary, because it wasn't. It was a struggling school. But we took scores, we took our science scores, you know, from the low 60s to about 78% an hour. Some of you may have my resume. I'm trying to remember the data. We took math, It wasn't the highest, but we took it up to 64% from where it was at 58 or 56%. We took social studies up from 80-something% to 90%. We increased the graduation rate. We increased enrollment in that school. We were able to close gaps because we were intentional with the plan that we put in place. And we were relentless. We didn't allow for anybody to push us to the side, or we didn't allow for people to tell us what we weren't going to be able to do for our kids. So I've done that work. I've done that work in Baltimore County. If you look at some of the schools, Dundalk High School is one. I would tell you to take a strong look at that school. It's arguably one of the worst high schools right now in Baltimore County, but they're actually thriving. We put a new building in place, a $100 million building that opened up about 2 or 3 years ago. Enrollment is up in this school by well over 200 students. The graduation rate at one time, about 5 years ago, was at about 58%. When the graduation rates come out this year, they will be at 79%. 79%. And that may be the lowest graduation rate that I'll have in the county. My goal was to try to have every school at 80% or higher, right? And so, we've been able to do that, but it's just by, being intentional and really having a strategic plan that's tight, but everybody really understands it and everybody knows, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, here's what we need to do, and here's the plan to get us there. Here's the blueprint.
Okay, the district recently acquired a provisional state accreditation. Will you creatively or consistently work toward reaching full accreditation? What would be your plan?
So, yeah, that's absolutely the plan. I mean, the plan is to become fully accredited. That's a non-negotiable. That's what we're striving for. And like I said, really a part of that plan has to truly focus on the social and emotional deficiencies that our kids are coming to school with, right? Because here's the reality. You can put the greatest teachers in front of kids, you can put the greatest, most robust curriculum in front of kids, but if you don't address the social and emotional deficiencies, all of that is for nothing, right? So part of that plan really has to focus on how do we make sure that we have wraparound services, not just in a select group of schools, but really across the entire school system. And I feel like if we're able to put that in place, a lot of their needs that aren't being met at home, they will be met. And then you have to pull those 2 layers down. Once you pull those 2 layers down, and like I said earlier, you get them to put their guards down, now the learning can take place. Because if I'm in a geometry class and I'm learning about the Pythagorean theorem and we're talking about a squared plus b squared equals, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about what I have to go home and deal with later. And then all of a sudden I've missed the most important part of that formula in order for me to be able to solve these problems moving forward. And so we have to make sure that we have the wraparound services, and I feel like a major part of that needs to be in our plan. And I would assume that as we're going in and we're engaging the community, we'll probably hear a lot of those same things, during that 100-day listening tour. But that's what's worked for me. That's what's working at Dundalk. We have wraparound services in place. That's what my dissertation is on: school culture, school climate, and how that impacts, how our kids are going to succeed. And because we've done that work, my dissertation is at that school, Dundalk High School. That school is really beginning to thrive as a result of a lot of work that we did around school culture, school climate, and the wraparound services.
And Dr. Bedell, what's been your single greatest accomplishment in urban education?
So for me, I would have to say the Booker T experience. When I went into that school in 2007, I was hired probably about 3 or 4 days before teachers were coming back. And the community did not want me. They protested me. They were at the board meetings. They were on the news. My wife would tell you it was probably one of the most difficult. I've been through a lot. But to have a whole bunch of people not like you and you didn't do anything but get hired, that was crazy, right? And so, and people told me, they said, by December, you will be out of here. You will be out of here. They did not even give me a chance. And at the end of the 3 years of being there, we had to have a community meeting in order for me to be promoted because they were getting ready to protest because they didn't want me to leave. And to me, that's a major accomplishment because of what we were able to do in that school, the mentoring program that we put in school-wide. And I told all of my teachers, I said, you give me the 10 worst boys in this school, and every Tuesday during advocacy, I will work with those 10 boys. And some of them I kicked out, I kicked them out. I mean, I can't work with you, you going to CEP, right? I put them out. But they came back, and I never gave up on them. I never gave up on those students. And I can tell you that I said, you will be a part of my mentoring group. That group actually had grown to 14. So every Tuesday, I was held accountable for those kids. Before you were going to kick a kid out of that classroom, you needed to let me know. If the kid before the kid went home with a progress report, they had to go through me. If a kid had a 68 or a 69, it was my job to go talk to that teacher and figure out how we can work with that kid to get this kid a C. Teachers in my school started doing that. Eventually, we had the lowest retention rate in the entire school system out of comprehensive high schools. 3.2% of our kids weren't promoted from one grade to the next because everybody in my school took ownership over the kids that they were responsible for mentoring. And let me tell you what happened. I told an AP, give me your list of 10. The AP gave me her list. I started reading the names off. I was in the cafeteria doing cafeteria duty. And yes, as a principal, I love doing cafeteria duty because it was a great opportunity for me to interact with kids. And I started reading off the names to her. She said, well, I said, who is this? She doesn't know. I said, listen, this is not for compliance. I need you to go find 10 people that you truly believe that you've interacted with, that you can make a difference in their lives. So this list is unacceptable. We're not doing this for compliance. We're doing this because we want to make the difference in the lives of kids. And that same model is what we put in place at Cashmere High School, the one where we did Saturday and Sunday school, and it's the same model that we put in place at Dundalk High School. And it's paying huge dividends.
How do you measure growth and progress toward recognized benchmarks? There's a long question here. It's some moving parts here. How do you measure growth and progress toward recognized benchmarks with respect to students, workforce, peers?
So, how do you measure?
How do you measure growth and progress toward recognized benchmarks with respect to students, workforce, and peers?
Okay, so once again, I think as you're looking at growth metrics, a lot of what you will put in your theory of action in your strategic plan will be particular goals that you want to set. So if you're establishing goals to say that, you know, our ultimate goal is graduation rate right now in this county is at 65%. So at the end of 2017, 2017, with the class that's going to graduate next year, we want to see that graduation rate increase from 65%, and you have to be realistic. Maybe it goes from 65 to 68%, and then from 68% to 71% or 72%. And you set your 5-year trend data, and then you make sure that in your plan, you have specific ways of being able to monitor to ensure that you are hitting these targets. So when you're going in and you're doing a board presentation, it's a board presentation around what the board has approved on in terms of your theory of action and your strategic plan. So you want to make sure that you have metrics in place. It's in terms of, how kids, and I guess what's the last part? Something about students. I mean, this question is throwing me a little bit.
Well, it talks about the benchmarks in respect to students, workforce, and peers.
Okay, so student workforce, so is that with basically the students who are matriculating into internships and things of that? Oh, the district workforce? Okay, so I'll just answer to the best of my ability. So even if it's dealing with internships, and kids having an opportunity to receive practical experience in the field. You want to make sure that, you know, we have the manual technical school where there's a lot of kids that are on that CTE track, and we were talking about that today. How many of those kids are having opportunities to get internship experience? You know, how do we make sure that our kids are getting some of that practical experience? I think as far as the last component, that has to be done through surveys in terms of peers and how they interact with each other. You want to make sure that, you know, we've done an initiative in Baltimore County where we do bullying week. We started off with bullying day, and now it's extended to a bully-free week. And we survey all of our kids. We give out a stakeholder survey that includes responses from students. We ask our schools to give students an opportunity so we can kind of get an idea of what's happening in terms of their perceptions with their relationships from a peer-to-peer standpoint. So a lot of it is just making sure that we are giving kids voice. One of the things that we do extremely well in Baltimore County is our superintendent, you know, he hosts at least 2 town hall meetings a year for students, where he gives students an opportunity to engage directly with him. And so that's definitely one of the initiatives that I will bring on board here, where I get to have an opportunity for students to engage in the same process like you all are engaging in. Unscripted, an opportunity for them to be authentic with me and for me to be authentic with them in the responses.
Okay, the last question before we'll have an opportunity to give a summary and closing remarks. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being most important, how important is the contextualization of pedagogy for effective learning outcomes?
Okay, well, no, that's extremely important. I mean, that's why we're here, right? I mean, so we have to make sure, and I know that, you know, looking at the budget, I saw that each year over the last couple of years, we continuously lose Title II money. You know, Title II money is designed for us to be able to provide professional development that will allow for our teachers to become pedagogically stronger. And so, you know, we have to now figure out, you know, how do we, and I don't know if we have a grant writer in this county, but when I go and I look at the money that we're receiving from grants, I don't see a lot in there, right? And I know that grants are something that there's a lot of free money out there, but we have to write the grants, and we have to put a compelling proposal in place that will allow for us to bring in the resources that we need so we can bring consultants in, so we can bring people in to provide the professional development for our teachers. If we're not pedagogically strong, then we're already doomed. We're doomed. Because if we don't engage our students in a way that really will allow for them to personalize the concepts and objectives that they're learning in a major way, then we're just pushing kids through the system. And that's the worst thing that we can do, because kids will remember that, and believe it or not, we become victims of that when these kids can't go out and get a job, and these kids don't have an opportunity to live in a world where they can thrive. Then we become the victims in terms of crime and our family members and the poverty impacts that really impact this school, this city as a whole.
Okay, we're done with the questions, and you can give us some closing remarks.
All right, so as we close out, I'm becoming hoarse. We've been going at it since 7:15 this morning, and it has indeed been a great experience. You know, what I want to share with all of you is, you know, this is what you're going to get. All right, I may not be the most polished person. I may not have the most experience in terms of being a superintendent, but what I have is a heart. I genuinely care, and I'm here to make a difference. And I feel like if I'm given the opportunity, you know, I'm not the type of person, I've been through too much in my life. As I said earlier, I don't intimidate easy, and we know that because when I went into that school and I was being protested against, I went in there and I stood strong, and I was able to work in a way where I convinced these people to become believers in the work that we were doing for their children. And I know that I'll be able to do that if I'm given this opportunity. I feel like I'm ready. I feel like I have a tremendous amount of experience working in Texas, which is basically its own union in itself. We make our own decisions. And I needed to move to Baltimore County because I needed to get experience more on the national level. They were a part of the partnership consortium with Park. They are part of Common Core. We have unions. It's given me an opportunity to learn a lot in the 4 years that I'm pretty much would have been here in Baltimore County. And now I get to bring all of those rich experiences to a school system like this, a school system that's headed in the right direction, a school system where people are just wanting to make sure that we have a sense of hope, that we're not in a hopeless situation, and a school system where people can say, we finally have somebody who genuinely wants to be here, who wants to build a consistency and some stability for our kids. Then I'm your person. I'm the person that can come here and do that. And like I said, my wife and I, we stand committed. My wife is an attorney. She does a lot of family law. She really wants to get more on the board of doing advocacy for some of our kids that don't have any representation. So she's going to also become another asset in this community to give back to some of our kids who just don't have anybody to advocate for them. And that's what we're going to bring to the table. We will become advocates for this entire city and the children that are in this school system. So I just want to thank you all for engaging with me over this last hour, and we'll see what happens. The board has a tough decision to make, and and I don't want to be in their shoes.